Chief Adwale's mansion was a monument to excess, a cavernous space where light fractured through crystal chandeliers onto the polished faces of the city's elite. The air hummed with the clatter of gold-rimmed porcelain and the brittle laughter of guests whose eyes constantly calculated the room's opportunities. Seated at the head of a table laden with delicacies from across the globe, Adwale felt a chilling disconnect, as if he were watching a play from a great distance. He was the star performer in a theater of his own making, yet he knew none of his lines. His guests' smiles were transactional, their conversations laced with subtle pleas for investment or influence. He lifted a heavy, ornate goblet, and in its reflective surface he saw the terrifying truth. His eyes were hollow, his soul shriveling inside a body pampered by unimaginable luxury. A single, hot tear defied his control, tracing a path down his cheek and splashing into the deep red wine. In that moment, the festive cacophony faded into a muffled roar, overpowered by the deafening silence of his own profound isolation. He was the wealthiest man for 100 miles, yet he possessed nothing of genuine value, no true friendship, no love, no peace. This gilded existence was a masterfully crafted cage, and he was its sole, desperate inmate, performing a role that was systematically erasing his very humanity. The night stretched before him, an endless procession of meaningless exchanges, each one a fresh confirmation of the void where his heart should have been, a chilling emptiness that no amount of material wealth could ever hope to fill or even comprehend. Sleep provided no sanctuary from his waking torment. That night, Chief Adwale was transported to a cracked and barren wasteland, standing on the crumbling banks of the River of Life. Its waters, remembered as a mighty, life-giving torrent, were now a sickly, pathetic trickle, choked by mud and despair. A voice, ancient and resonant, echoed across the desolate landscape with a simple, terrifying command: save it. Seized by a frantic, compulsive need, Adwale began shoveling endless piles of gold coins into the dying stream, believing his wealth could restore its flow. But the treasure acted as a corrosive poison. Where each coin struck the water, it hissed and steamed, the liquid vanishing instantly, leaving behind only more barren, cracked earth. The more gold he desperately poured, the faster the river receded, until the channel was nothing but a desolate gulch filled with a glittering, useless sea of metal. He collapsed to his knees, his throat raw with an unquenchable thirst, his hands tearing at the sand in a futile search for moisture. The voice returned, now a sorrowful whisper that shook the foundations of his being. "You cannot drink wealth." He awoke with a strangled gasp, the phantom taste of dust coating his tongue, the devastating image of the golden desert seared permanently into his mind. The dream was a brutal, unequivocal diagnosis of his spiritual sickness. His life's work of relentless accumulation was a direct path to soul death. The river of his own spirit was drying up, and his gold was the very agent of its destruction, a truth he could no longer ignore as he sat trembling in the oppressive silence of his bedroom. The days following the prophetic dream bled into one another, forming a gray, monotonous procession where time itself seemed to have lost all meaning. His world, once a vibrant tapestry of power and influence, had been drained of all its color and sensation. His personal chef presented a dish of rare white truffles and foie gras, but the flavors registered as nothing more than fine ash on Adwale's tongue. His sprawling, silent bedroom, a marvel of luxury, became a prison of insomnia where he spent long hours staring at the ornate ceiling, counting the moments until dawn. The people surrounding him were mere ghosts, their presence insubstantial. His chief assistant spoke in an emotionless monotone of schedules, acquisitions, and profit margins. His so-called friends engaged in conversation only to skillfully steer it toward potential investments or requests for favors. He was not a person to them. He was a resource, a vault, a means to a financial end. The final, crushing blow came when he overheard two young gardeners, hidden by a lush hedge, discussing the precise monetary value of his prized orchids with cold, clinical calculation, utterly indifferent to their breathtaking beauty. The realization was a physical blow to his chest. He was utterly and completely alone. His palace was a beautifully decorated tomb, his life a hollow performance for an audience that cared only for the props. The curse was this deep, unshakable, and profound isolation. He could purchase anything the material world had to offer except for a single, authentic moment of human connection. He was drowning in a sea of his own making, and the immense weight of his gold was pulling him deeper into a cold, dark abyss from which he feared there was no return. The decision to escape did not arrive in a dramatic, thundering epiphany, but crystallized with a quiet, unyielding resolve as the first rays of sun painted his bedroom walls. Seated at his vast, empty mahogany desk, Chief Adwale methodically signed a series of complex legal documents, transferring control of his entire business empire to a board of trustees and a handful of distant, uninterested relatives. There were no heartfelt farewells, no explanations offered to confused associates. He packed a single, worn leather bag with a few simple, sturdy garments, a faded book of poetry from his youth that he hadn't opened in decades, and a small, locked wooden box that contained the final, heavy relics of his former life. Shedding his exquisitely tailored suits for the plain, comfortable clothes of a wandering traveler, he felt an immediate, almost shocking sense of liberation, as if he had removed a suit of armor he had worn for a lifetime. He walked slowly through the cavernous, echoing halls of his mansion, past the portraits of his stern-faced ancestors whose painted eyes seemed to follow his retreat with silent judgment. He did not pause for a final look at the grand doorway. He simply stepped out into the cool, clean morning air, the scent of dew on the grass and rich earth a shocking and delightful novelty to his numbed senses. The massive, wrought-iron gates of his estate swung shut behind him with a deep, resonant clang of absolute, irrevocable finality. He did not look back. The fortress of his past was closed forever. Ahead lay an unknown, winding path, a terrifying and yet exhilarating blank page upon which he hoped to finally write a new story for himself, one not defined by the weight of wealth, but by the pursuit of genuine meaning and human connection. He walked for many days, then weeks, his city-soft feet blistering, callousing, and finally hardening to the unyielding earth, his mind slowly unraveling the tight, complex knots of corporate strategy and constant calculation. The dense, noisy urban landscape gradually softened into sprawling, open farmland, which then yielded to the lush, untamed beauty of the deep countryside, where the air itself tasted cleaner. His journey, guided more by instinct than any map, led him to Igber, a small cluster of mud-brick homes with thatched roofs nestled in a green, peaceful valley like a precious, well-kept secret. The air was a vibrant tapestry of elemental smells, the sharp scent of wood smoke, the sweet aroma of roasting plantains, and the rich, pungent fragrance of the red earth after a brief rain. The dust from the path clung to his shoes and trousers, a tangible, grounding marker of his physical and spiritual transformation. Children, their laughter ringing with a purity and freedom he had never known, chased a ball made of tightly bound rags. No one glanced at him with recognition, suspicion, or expectation. He was merely another weary traveler on an endless road. For the first time in over 3 decades, he was truly anonymous, and the feeling was a profound, soul-deep relief. The constant, grinding pressure to perform, to be Chief Adwale, evaporated into the warm air. Here, life moved to the ancient, patient rhythm of the sun and the seasons, not the frantic, artificial pulse of the stock market clock. He found a quiet spot under a large, generous acacia tree and simply watched, a humble student beginning to learn the quiet, complex language of community and mutual reliance that had been entirely absent from his former existence. A deep, gnawing exhaustion and a hunger that was more than physical finally forced him to rest on an overturned, weathered basket near a small, bustling food stall, where the air was rich with the nutty, inviting scent of frying akara. The woman who ran the stall, Mama Enkem, noticed his weary, pale face and the slight tremor in his hands. Without a single word of inquiry or hesitation, she ladled a generous portion of a thick, hearty stew, filled with sweet potatoes and bitter leaves, into a simple clay bowl and handed it to him alongside a piece of soft cassava bread. It was immediately clear, from the modest size of her cooking pot and the careful way she served her own family, that this was a significant personal sacrifice. His hands, once accustomed to handling million-dollar contracts and steering corporate empires, trembled as he accepted the simple, earth-toned meal. "Why?" he whispered, his voice rough with a potent mixture of emotion and disuse. "Why would you do this for a stranger you have never seen before?" Mama Enkem wiped her hands on her faded apron, her smile radiating a warmth and sincerity he had forgotten could exist in the world. "A shared burden is a halved burden," she said gently, her eyes crinkling at the corners. "And hunger is a guest who respects no one's pride, so we must respect it in turn." In that simple, profound act of unconditional giving, he felt the first, distinct crack appear in the icy, fortified walls he had built around his heart. The stew was the most nourishing meal he had ever eaten, its true value measured not in its cost, which was negligible, but in the boundless generosity and profound human connection of its offering. A deep, unfamiliar sense of gratitude, a feeling so long dormant it was almost painful, compelled him to return to Mama Enkem's stall the very next day. "My name is Griot," he said, the first name that felt unburdened and right. "Please, you must allow me to repay your kindness. Let me work." He began with the most humble, foundational tasks, scrubbing the large, soot-blackened iron pots until they shone, sweeping the hard-packed earth around her stall until it was clean, making the long, repetitive trips to the communal well to draw heavy buckets of water. The villagers were initially amused by the sight of the older, clearly city-bred man performing such basic manual labor, their chuckles echoing through the market. But their light mockery soon softened into a quiet, growing respect for his willingness to learn and his lack of pretense. When the village's sole public water tap, which had dripped uselessly for months, suddenly gushed with a strong, steady flow after Griot spent an entire afternoon patiently repairing its internal mechanism, a young boy ran through the market, his voice ringing with excitement. "Baba Ola has fixed it. Baba Ola has fixed it." The name, meaning bringer of blessings, was bestowed not by him, but by the community, given with pure, unadulterated joy, and it stuck. He had been reborn, not through a formal proclamation or legal document, but through purposeful, tangible action. The deep satisfaction he felt from this simple, practical fix was more genuine and fulfilling than any multi-million-dollar corporate victory he had ever engineered. He was patiently building a new identity, piece by piece, earned with his own 2 hands and a willing heart. As the weeks turned seamlessly into months, Baba Ola became an integral, cherished thread in the vibrant social fabric of Igbo. His sharp, analytical mind, once focused exclusively on hostile takeovers and market domination, was now dedicated to the village's simple, tangible needs and practical problems. He showed a young family how to better align and reinforce their hut's roof to withstand the coming seasonal rains. He patiently sat with a group of fascinated children, teaching them how to safely whittle a spinning top from a fallen piece of mango wood. He calmly mediated a heated, potentially divisive argument between 2 neighboring farmers over a stray goat, his logical and fair approach acting as a balm to their heated tempers. In response, the entire village began to flourish with a renewed spirit of unity, cooperation, and bright-eyed optimism. And then, a quiet miracle occurred by Mama Enkem's stall. The ancient, gnarled fig tree, long believed by everyone to be completely dead, suddenly and inexplicably burst forth with a magnificent canopy of vibrant green leaves and delicate, sweet-smelling blossoms. It was a quiet, unspoken wonder that the villagers universally saw as a divine blessing on their community and its new member. Baba Ola would often sit in its dappled shade in the cool of the evening, a profound and hard-won peace settling over his spirit. He was no longer a passive consumer of resources. He was an active contributor to a collective life. The tree's dramatic revival mirrored his own spiritual awakening, Both were living proof that with genuine care, patient effort, and true connection, even that which seems long lifeless can bloom again with breathtaking vitality. Despite his seamless and heartfelt integration into the daily life of Igbur, curious whispers began to flutter through the village like dry leaves caught in a gentle wind. Baba Ola's hands, though now calloused and strong from manual work, were still elegantly shaped, his fingers long and surprisingly dexterous, not the broad, gnarled hands of a man who had labored in the fields his entire life. His speech, though he consciously tried to keep it simple and accessible, was occasionally, unconsciously, punctuated with sophisticated words and complex concepts that hinted unmistakably at a deep and formal education far beyond the village school. "He is a chief in exile," the elders murmured thoughtfully over their calabashes of palm wine. "A great man hiding from a painful past," the women speculated in low tones while washing clothes at the river. The mystery intensified palpably when a merchant from the city, passing through to sell his wares, stared at Baba Ola with a flicker of puzzled, almost recognition before shaking his head in confusion and moving on. The seed of doubt was firmly sown in the fertile ground of collective curiosity. Who was this enigmatic, capable stranger who had arrived with nothing but a quiet dignity and a willingness to help? The children, of course, adored him unconditionally, but the adults, with their longer memories and wider understanding of the world, could not help but continually wonder about the hidden, untold chapters of his life story. The mystery became a low, persistent hum beneath the familiar surface of their daily lives, a question that lingered in the air unasked but ever present. One particularly tranquil evening, as they shared a simple meal of pounded yam and egusi soup under a vast, starlit sky that seemed close enough to touch, Mama Enkem spoke from the heart about her late husband's most cherished, yet unfulfilled dream: to build a small, sturdy school for the village children so they would not have to undertake the long, dangerous walk to the next town for a basic education. Her eyes grew soft and distant with the memory of his passion and his untimely death. "He used to say that knowledge is a light that can never be extinguished, not even by the strongest wind," she recalled, her voice thick with a mixture of sorrow and enduring pride. Baba Ola listened intently, his own heart stirring with a powerful, resonant sense of purpose, feeling a deep desire to honor this man he had never met. "Perhaps," he said softly, the idea forming fully as he spoke, "we can make that dream live and breathe. We can gather the materials ourselves: mud, timber, thatch. We can rally the people. We can build it together with our own hands. But let it be our secret for now, a gift from this village to its own bright future." Her trust in him was immediate, absolute, and deeply moving, a bond of faith far stronger than any legal contract he had ever signed. She did not question how it would be funded or organized. She simply believed with every fiber of her being that if Baba Ola declared it possible, then it would undoubtedly be so. Her unwavering faith was a sacred responsibility he silently vowed to honor, no matter the cost to himself. A violent, unexpected storm descended upon the village one night with the fury of a wild beast, a torrential downpour that threatened to tear the entire market apart with its lashing winds and punishing rain. While others hurriedly secured their own homes and shutters, Baba Ola was seen by a few, a solitary, determined figure moving through the blinding rain, using his forgotten knowledge of engineering and physics to strategically reinforce the stalls of others with strong rope, spare wooden beams, and heavy stones. He worked tirelessly through the heart of the tempest, his clothes soaked through, his hands raw and cold, driven by a fierce, protective love for this community that had taken him in. At dawn, as the storm clouds retreated, the villagers emerged to a scene of stark and telling contrast. Every stall he had fortified stood strong, intact, and dry, while all the others were reduced to pathetic splinters and piles of ruined, waterlogged goods. The villagers looked upon him with a new, reverent awe, whispering in hushed tones that a guardian spirit or a blessed ancestor walked among them, protecting them from harm. His selfless actions had spoken louder than any rumor or speculation. He was not just a kind man. He was their dedicated protector, their unspoken guardian. The practical, unassuming aid he offered in the storm's aftermath, tirelessly helping his neighbors rebuild what was lost, only served to deepen the village's profound and unwavering loyalty toward him, cementing his place as a cornerstone of their collective well-being. A young, earnest boy named Kofi, who often helped Baba Ola with small chores in exchange for stories, was vigorously shaking out his sleeping mat one sunny morning when a small, worn leather wallet, dark with age and use, fell from a hidden fold and landed silently in the red dust. Curious, Kofi picked it up and carefully opened it. Inside, he found no money, but a faded, sepia-toned photograph of a severe-looking, unsmiling man in an impeccably expensive Western-style suit, and a single slip of thick, expensive paper bearing the elegantly embroidered initials, A.A. Kofi, who was just beginning to learn his letters from a traveling teacher, felt a cold jolt of recognition. He remembered a brightly colored poster pinned in the nearby town's market square, offering a large reward for information about the missing billionaire chief Adwale Adami. His heart hammered against his ribs like a trapped bird. The man in the poster and the stern man in the photograph were unmistakably one and the same. The coincidence was too immense, too terrifying to ignore. He held the wallet, a dangerous, heavy secret burning in his small, trembling hands. Should he tell his parents? Should he confront Baba Ola directly? A fierce, protective fear for his friend's safety and a powerful sense of loyalty warred violently within his young heart as he carefully, secretively, hid the wallet deep in his own pocket, its weight a constant, troubling presence throughout the long day. Word, as it always does, traveled with astonishing speed along the narrow, dusty bush paths that connected the villages. Alarming news quickly reached Igbar that men in sharp, expensive city suits were asking urgent, pointed questions in the neighboring town, showing a faded photograph of a stern, unsmiling Chief Adwale and offering a substantial, tempting reward for any credible information about his whereabouts. A nervous, protective energy instantly gripped the village, tightening like a fist. Were these men a threat to their beloved Baba Ola? Were they here to drag him back to a life he had so clearly and deliberately abandoned? Was the financial reward merely a trap to lure the unwary? As the sun began its descent, painting the sky in fiery hues of orange and purple, one of the suited men was seen receiving precise directions from the town's chief, and with a determined gait. Starting down the very path that led directly toward Igbar, the very air in the village grew thick and heavy with palpable tension. Mothers called their children inside from their play, their voices sharp with anxiety. The men of the village gathered instinctively near the main entrance, their expressions set in grim, unified determination, their bodies forming a silent, human barrier. The peaceful, idyllic bubble they had lived in for so long was about to be violently pierced. The outside world, with all its complications, demands, and dangers, was coming, and it was coming directly for their Baba Ola. The building, almost unbearable tension shattered in the worst, most heartbreaking way possible. Mama Enkem, the village's unwavering cornerstone and its moral compass, suddenly collapsed at her stall, her body burning with a fever so intense that no local remedy or herbal poultice could even begin to break its terrifying hold. The village healer, after a long examination, could only shake his head in profound despair. She needed powerful modern medicine, strong antibiotics, that were only available in the distant city. Their cost a small fortune, a sum far beyond the entire village's combined means for an entire year. Baba Ola sat by her bedside in her small, dark, and smoky hut, clutching her limp, feverish hand, his face a stark mask of pure terror and gut-wrenching anguish. The very thought of losing this woman, the first person who had shown him unconditional kindness, the one who had seen the man beneath the traveler's weary disguise, was an emotional agony far greater than any loneliness or boardroom defeat he had ever known. Her shallow, ragged, and irregular breaths were a terrifying countdown to a loss he knew he could not possibly bear. He would not, he vowed silently, let the very light that had saved his own life be cruelly extinguished. He would move heaven and earth, Or rather, he would utilize the one thing he had renounced and come to despise to save her, his vast, cursed wealth. Driven by a desperate, fierce, and protective love, Baba Ola retrieved the small, locked wooden box from its clever hiding place beneath his thin sleeping mat. With the small, cold key he still wore on a string around his neck, the final physical tether to his old life, he opened it with a quiet click. Inside, gleaming dully in the hut's dim light, lay the stark, undeniable evidence of his past, a heavy, intricately designed gold signet ring bearing the proud Adami family crest, a pair of flawless, glittering diamond cufflinks, and an official-looking banknote that promised to pay the bearer a sum so staggering it was meaningless here. He looked at these cold, glittering objects with visceral revulsion, as if they were artifacts of a plague he had only recently survived. Then he looked at Mama Enkem's pale, suffering, and peaceful face, and his resolve hardened. "Forgive me, my dearest friend," he whispered, his voice breaking with a sob he could no longer contain. "I have not been honest with you. My silence was a lie, but I will use this cursed treasure, this blood money, to save your life. It is the only good thing it will ever have done." The decision was made, his vow of anonymity broken for a cause greater than himself. He would reclaim his past to secure her future. A new, steely resolve forged in the fires of desperation replaced his earlier despair. With the help of the strongest village men, Baba Ola tenderly carried Mama Enkem on a makeshift stretcher fashioned from strong branches and a blanket, toward the main road to flag down any passing vehicle that could take them to the city hospital. A small, solemn group of villagers followed closely behind, a silent, worried procession of barefoot hope and fierce, communal loyalty. They arrived at the city's main hospital, a gleaming, sterile fortress of glass, steel, and bright fluorescent lights that seemed to swallow their humble, earthy presence whole. The visual contrast was jarring, a violent collision of two diametrically opposed worlds. The villagers, in their simple, worn clothes, stood huddled together in the vast, cold, echoing lobby, their eyes wide with a mixture of fear, awe, and confusion, while Baba Ola, with an authority and commanding tone he had not used in over a year, began to demand immediate, urgent medical attention for his dying friend. As Baba Ola argued passionately, his voice rising with frantic urgency, with a skeptical, overworked hospital receptionist about the critical nature of Mama Enkem's condition, a well-dressed man waiting in the plush lobby did a sudden, unmistakable double-take. His eyes widened in sheer disbelief. He fumbled for his smartphone, scrolled frantically through a series of saved images, and then looked back at the disheveled but still commanding figure at the front desk. "Chief Adwale." He gasped, loud enough for everyone in the vicinity to hear. "By God, it is really you." Within mere minutes, the hospital's main entrance was swarmed by a mob of reporters and journalists, their cameras flashing like a lightning storm, microphones thrust forward like weapons. The news exploded across every news channel and social media platform. Missing billionaire found, living as a peasant in remote village. In the chaotic, frenzied maelstrom of shouted questions and blinding lights, Mama Enkem's eyes fluttered weakly open. She saw the commotion, saw the way the entire world now looked at her gentle, humble friend with a mixture of shock and reverence, and she understood everything in a single, illuminating instant. A weak, knowing, and serene smile touched her pale lips. "So," she whispered hoarsely, her voice barely audible over the media din, "you were the river man all along." The great mystery of his identity was solved, not in a quiet confession, but in a very public, explosive storm of publicity and shock. Standing on the hospital's clean, cold steps, surrounded by a forest of microphones and the stunned, worried faces of his villagers who had pushed their way to the front, Adwale shed the final, tattered remnants of his disguise. He did not speak of business, his vanished empire, or his regained wealth. With tears streaming openly, unashamedly down his face, he spoke instead of his spiritual emptiness, his haunting dream of the dying river and the woman who had offered a starving, lost stranger her last bowl of soup without a second thought. "I was the richest man you knew," he declared, his voice clear, strong, and resonant, carrying over the now silent crowd. And I was the poorest. I was a living skeleton in a palace of gold. I went searching for my soul, and I found it. I found it in the people who had nothing by your standards, yet who gave everything out of the goodness of their hearts. They taught me the one lesson my fortune never could, that true wealth is not what you have in your vaults, but what you give from your heart. It was not a speech of corporate power or political maneuvering, but one of raw, unvarnished redemption, a heartfelt confession that laid his soul bare for the entire world to see, and that united reporters, hospital staff, and villagers alike in a single, profound moment of shared, awestruck humanity. Chief Adwale, now fully embracing both his past name and his present identity, performed his final and most meaningful act as a billionaire. He legally transferred his entire remaining fortune into a newly established foundation named for Mama Enkem's late husband, its purpose not to enrich his own family, but to systematically build schools, dig deep, clean wells, and establish basic medical clinics across the poorest, most neglected rural regions, beginning, of course, with Igbo. The architectural plans were not drafted in a distant, air-conditioned office. They were drawn with sticks in the sand with the villagers themselves, a collaborative, democratic vision made thrillingly real. He used his formidable, world-class business acumen not for personal profit, but for creating sustainable, community-led progress, ensuring every project was owned, operated, and maintained by the people it served. The money, which had once been a curse that isolated him, was now transformed into a powerful conduit for life and dignity, a long-dammed river of resources finally allowed to flow freely to the parched places where it could do genuine, lasting good for generations to come. Months later, with the foundation's work underway, the entire village of Igbo gathered in a joyous, celebratory crowd for the completion of the very first deep-bore well. With a great, collective, heartfelt cheer that shook the very leaves on the trees, the new hand pump was primed and activated, and clean, fresh, cold water gushed forth, sparkling like diamonds in the bright sunlight. Children shrieked with uninhibited joy, dancing and splashing in the life-giving spray, their laughter the most beautiful music Adwale had ever heard. Mama Enkem, now recovered but left physically frail by her illness, stood proudly beside Adwale, her hand resting gently on his arm, her smile serene and deeply proud. As the water flowed ceaselessly, the devastating image from his dream, the river of sand and poisonous gold, flashed vividly before his eyes, but was now permanently replaced by this vibrant, life-affirming, miraculous reality. The spiritual curse was broken forever. The water was a powerful, daily symbol of his complete transformation, a reminder that the most essential things in life are often the simplest, and that the greatest, most rewarding investments are always those made selflessly in the health and well-being of others. The village, at long last, had its own independent, reliable river of life. A grand, celebratory feast was held, not in a sterile marble hall, but under the boundless, star-dusted expanse of the African sky, with a crackling fire as its central heart. There was unrestrained laughter, the thunderous, rhythmic beating of a dozen drums, the energetic, graceful dancing of both the young and the old, and the incredibly inviting smell of a true communal feast, roasted meat, spiced rice, and fresh, steaming vegetables. Adwale, now simply and universally Baba Ola to everyone, sat contentedly on a simple, low stool among his people, eating from a hand-thrown clay bowl, his heart feeling fuller and more complete than it had ever been at any state banquet or gala. As the central fire crackled and spat sparks into the night, he stood slowly and raised his hands for silence. "My people," he began, his voice steady and warm, "I have given away my material fortune, but in its place, I have found my true family, my real home, my immeasurable wealth. I am staying here with you as Baba Ola, nothing more and nothing less." The roar of approval, love, and acceptance that erupted from the entire crowd was the greatest, most valuable reward he had ever received, a sound more precious than any stock dividend or business triumph. He was, finally and completely home. Time, as it always must, moved forward with its gentle, inexorable pace, healing some wounds and deepening others. Mama Enkem, having seen her beloved husband's dream realized in the sturdy, new schoolhouse filled with the sound of learning children, passed away peacefully in her sleep one quiet, beautiful evening, her life's purpose fulfilled. She left a simple, hand-written note for Edwale, the letters formed with a trembling but determined hand. You gave away your gold, but in return you gave us life, and you gave my husband his dream. You are the river now, Baba Ola. Keep flowing. Do not stop. They buried her under the deep, cooling shade of the now magnificently blossoming fig tree he had unknowingly revived upon his arrival, its roots now deep and strong, its widespread branches a permanent, living testament to her boundless kindness and his profound redemption. It became a sacred place for the village, a quiet spot for reflection, and a permanent reminder of the transformative power of selfless love and shared purpose. Years later, the village of Igber had been transformed into a beacon of sustainable, self-sufficient prosperity and hope. The school, now with several dedicated teachers, was constantly filled with the vibrant sound of children chanting lessons in mathematics, history, and their own rich cultural heritage. On the main wall of the new, spacious community hall, a vibrant, colorful mural depicted the entire story of their journey. A man in fine clothes walking away from a gray city, a single bowl of soup, a gushing well, a blossoming tree, with the words "Peace is greater than gold" painted boldly and proudly beneath the images. An older, gray-haired Edwale, his face lined not with the worries of business but with the laughter of children and the warmth of the sun, sat on a simple wooden bench, watching the next generation play and learn. His legacy was not a name etched on a cold building plaque, but the bright, hopeful, and empowered future shining in the eager eyes of the children. He had built something that would truly endure, something that no stock market crash could ever diminish. He left a palace of gold seeking to fill an emptiness that wealth could never, ever touch. He found his answer not in receiving, but in giving. He learned, through sweat and service, that a life dedicated to others is a life of profound purpose, and that the richest soil for the soul is often found in the simplest, most authentic places. His greatest fortune was not what he had accumulated in his vaults, but what he had finally let go of from his heart. And in that sacred release, he found everything he had ever been searching for: genuine connection, unwavering purpose, and a peace that truly surpassed all worldly understanding. His journey is a permanent reminder to us all that the most valuable treasures are not measured in currency, but in the hearts we touch and the lives we change forever. True, lasting wealth is not what we keep locked away for ourselves, but what we share freely with the world. Chief Edwale gave away his entire material fortune, but in return, he gained a loving family, a meaningful purpose, and a peace that surpassed all understanding. He traded cold, hard gold for warm, living gratitude, and in doing so, built a legacy of love that would outlast any empire made of stone and steel. And somewhere in a quiet, thriving village, a river still flows, fed not by coins but by kindness, sustained not by wealth but by selfless love. What is the river in your own life? What can you give today, whether it be your time, your compassion, or your skills, that will bring life, hope, and sustenance to someone else's world? Share your own thoughts and stories of kindness in the comments below. Let's create a river of our own. Peace is greater than gold.